Hello Richard, my name is Adam Winrich and I wanted to make a quick video about your bullwhip, and I'm going to also show you a bunch of other bullwhips I have and talk about some stuff you might consider changing on your whip. First, I would like to say your plaiting is world class. This is a brilliant plaiting job, super great. The handle is so clean and the patterning is very beautiful. It's not as beautiful. And also your strand drops in the thong are immaculate. It's a great finish on the whip, so it's a world-class job of braiding. So I'm very happy with the braiding. However, the shape of the thong is not world-class. So there's a couple quick things I would recommend changing, and then I'll show you examples of this in other whips. First, the main thing you should absolutely change is the shape of your thong. I know you said that the belly goes 3/4 the length of the whip, probably somewhere down in here. There's no need for that. And David Morgan's bull whips and a lot of David's whips did start out at about 7/8 of an inch diameter, or maybe sometimes 1 inch. David's whips, his first belly would only go about 1/4 the length of the whip, and his second belly would only go half the length of the whip. And then the rest of the whip, the inside of it was just bolster and drop strands that were left in the core to form the taper. So there's no need for such a long belly. And the other thing I thought was interesting is that looking at your whip, your strands don't actually taper until you get into your 8-plait section about down in here. So they start at 6 millimeters, and it looks like there's 6 millimeters all the way to here, and then all the tapering in the strands happens just in this last little bit of the whip. So normally whip makers would do all of their tapering in the 16-plait section, or ever how many strands you start out with. So you would start out tapering all through here, and then that would mean you'd end up with a more refined looking whip. So you are at 3 millimeters here in the handle, so it's something you could totally do to start out at 6 millimeters here, taper the thong faster, and then taper your 16-plait strands down to 3 millimeters, and then do all of your drops in the second half of the whip. And then 3 millimeters also would be a great width for your strands at the point. All right, so let me show you some other whips, and I think you'll get a better idea of how they can be shaped. Let's see, so first let's do an 8-foot David Morgan bull whip. So this was made sometime in the 1980s. Hopefully, since the frame didn't change, you should already see a difference in the size of the whip and the shape of it. Here, I'll just go ahead and hold your whip next to it there so you can kind of see a difference in the bulk. So, and the main things you're going to see in David's work that I think are important for you to try out is that David starts tapering his thong like right away. Probably the fastest bit of tapering in the whip is right here within the first foot. And then all of the tapering in the overlay strands happens in the first half of the whip, all in the 12-plait section, and then the rest of the taper of the braiding happens through dropping strands. And you can see he's got about 13 inches of 6-plait section here at the end. This whip rolls out really well, and I like it as a really good example of an 8-footer that David has made, really good braiding. Let's see, moving on. So you mentioned that there not being too many good Australian whip makers to look at or to emulate. So I'm going to show you some whips by the top Australian whip makers. This one is by Mike Murphy. And so Mike actually made a really lightweight bull whip. This handle diameter is actually only about 18.5 millimeters. And you can see that he doesn't taper quite as fast off the end of the handle, but that's because the whip starts out so light. To still have a whip that has some punch and some oomph to it, you need to carry the weight out further. So when I saw pictures of your whips online, I actually thought they were this diameter. You can kind of compare the size right there. So I was really surprised when I took your whip out of the box and felt how heavy it was, because I was expecting something like this based on what I saw in the shape of your thong. You can also compare the point of your whip to Mike's whip and see how dainty his point is compared to yours. So that's Mike Murphy. He's retired now. Another very good Australian bullwhip maker that's still making bullwhips today is Russell Schultz. Russell lives in Ngunnawal, just outside of Canberra. So there's an example of Russell's work. Again, this one has more of a sort of handle size comparable to yours, but you can see how fine he tapers down in the point. And Russell is an example where he's kind of tapering your strands or he is tapering his strands a little bit more in a similar way you tapered your strands, where he didn't do any tapering until he got to the 8-plat section, and then he started tapering them down. But you can see how fine his point is when he finally got down there. And finally, another great Australian bull whip maker is Terry Jacka. So here's one of Terry's whips, and lucky that this is one of his later whips, and it doesn't have it doesn't have a lot of binding in the transition, which is really nice. And you can kind of see the handle diameter is similar, and however, you can see how fine his strands are by the time he gets down to the point. So that's one of Terry's bull whips. And now I'm going to show you just a couple other bull whips just for the heck of it. Here's one by Franco Zaccali from Canada. Franco does an excellent job on his finish. He's like obsessed with applying shellac to whips, so his whips always are very shiny and very pretty. You can see what it looks like in that he did all of his tapering in his overlay strands in the 16-plat section, and then started dropping strands further down in the thong, and he tapered his strands down a bit more. And then also you can notice your strands here are about 6 millimeters, but I think you could have covered the same size of core with like 5 millimeter strands. You can see that Franco's whip strands in his whip aren't as wide as they are in yours. And finally, one more bull whip that I just got. This is by an American whip maker named Steve Townsend. Steve usually makes Indiana Jones, David Morgan style bull whips, but he does a really good job braiding, and he's a very studious whip maker, so I challenged him to make a copy of a Terry Jacka whip, more to Terry's older style. So Terry's older whips were known to be lighter in weight, where he would put either fiberglass or even cane inside the handle to make so the handle was lighter but bulkier. But however, he did not continue that bulk through the rest of the whip. He started out with a bulky handle and then tapered off very quickly. So while this kind of whip may look puny in comparison to your whip, this is something that would be much more desirable for someone who's into sport whip cracking or just general whip cracking, because it's a manageable weight and there's a lot more cracks you can do with it. So that's my bit about your whip, some things I think you would change. Again, your plaiting is immaculate. Probably of all the whips I laid out here, I would say your plaiting is definitely right up there with all of them. Here, I'll put this Mike Murphy whip against yours again, so you can kind of get an idea of the difference in the finish, what it looks like if you split your leather down finer. But again, I would just say change the shape and the thong of your whip, and consider doing all of the tapering in your overlay strands in the 16-plat section in the first half of the whip. And if you're interested, I might consider getting another whip from you if you'd like to try some of these changes I'm suggesting. And I would also offer to make and trade to you a 6 or 7 foot nylon bull whip that I would make, and then obviously it's not worth what this is worth, so I would make up the difference with cash. So let me know if you would be interested in a trade so you can get your hands on at least one of the whips that I've made. Well, my name is Adam Winrich. Thanks for watching.